In the green hills of Korea, a crown lay hidden beneath the earth. When it was lifted from the soil centuries later, it dazzled like sunlight. Pure gold shaped into branches, antlers and dazzling jade beads that caught the light as though alive. The crown was silent, but it spoke of power, of belief, of a kingdom that once ruled in brilliance. This was Silla, born small in 57 BCE, surviving beside larger rivals, and then rising until it stood as one of the most enduring kingdoms of East Asia. For nearly 1,000 years, Silla carried both wealth and faith, blending gold and spirit into its identity. Its kings wore crowns like trees of light. Its monks built temples where stone Buddhas still sit in meditation. And from its capital in Yeonju, the kingdom stretched across the peninsula, uniting Korea under one banner for the first time in history. But Silla's story is not only about glory, it is about transformation, about how faith can lift a kingdom and how power, once too heavy, can sink it back into silence. What remains today are moons of earth that covers royal tombs, treasures that glitter in glass cases, and temples carved into stone that still echo with quiet chants. The question is not whether Silla was powerful. The question is how it turned gold and faith into a civilization that endured for nearly 1,000 years, and why, in the end, even crowns of gold could not hold it together. The land that would become Silla was not a kingdom yet. It was hills and valleys in Korea's southwest, dotted with villages of thatched huts and wooden palisades. Farmers bent over millets and rice. Hunters followed deer into the forest. Rivers cut narrow paths into the sea, carrying fish and reeds. Life here was simple, but it was steady, and it built the base for something greater. In 57 BCE, a small confederation of clans began to form in this particular region. They called it Saro, what we later know as Silla. At first, it was fragile. To the north, the great kingdoms of Goguryeo had armies on horseback. To the west, Baekje thrived on fertile plains. Silla was, by comparison, was small, easy to overlook, a child among giants. Yet the people here carried something the others did not: persistence and a talent for weaving unity out of many threads. Clans who once stood apart were bound together by marriage, rituals, and alliances. Leaders rose not only by force, but by proving they could keep the peace among their kin. They sacrificed to the mountains and rivers, prayed for harvest, and honored the dead with ceremonies that pulled villages into a shared rhythm. Into those rites, identity began to harden. Iron tools spread through the valleys. Spears and swords gave protection, but shovels and plows gave more food, enough to feed growing households, strength enough to build walls and expand fields. With every season, the villages grew closer, more bound. What had been scattered clans was slowly becoming a kingdom of its own. And though their rivals towered above them, Silla endured. They did not win by rushing forward, they won by surviving, by holding the soil, by bending, but never breaking. Every season that passed, every ritual spoken, every alliance sealed, turned the fragile confederation into something that would last for nearly 1,000 years. It began humbly in the southwest corner of this peninsula, in villages most would have dismissed. But from that soil rose Silla, a kingdom that would wear crowns of gold, shape temples of stone, and one day unify the entire Korea itself. Silla's beginning were quiet, but its rise was dazzling. By the 4th century CE, the kingdom had moved beyond survival. Villages expanded into towns, and the royal line began to carve its authority into the land. Gyeongju, the capital, swelled with life. From there, Silla's reach stretched outwards, pulling the peninsula's southwest into the steady orbit. Trade was lifeblood of this growth. Caravans and ships moved along the coast, linking Silla not only by its neighbors but to far wider worlds, China, Japan, and the Silk Road routes that carried silk, glass, and ideas. In return, Silla offered iron, horses, and gold. Wealth flowed into the kingdom, and wealth always leaves a mark. The mark is clearest in the tombs. The hill of Gyeongju began to rise with great earth moons, covering chambers filled with treasures. When these tombs were opened centuries later, they revealed the brilliance of Silla's world. Golden belts, rings, earrings, and most striking of all, crowns unlike any other. These crowns were not only heavy block of metals, they were delicate and symbolic, crafted into tree-like branches and antlers, strung with jade beads called gogok, gold cut into thin sheets, bent and hammered until it shimmered with impossible lights. They were worn not only as a sign of rule, but as a bridge between the human and the divine. The crown was a kingdom in miniature, root in the earth, branches reaching for heaven, beads sowing like fruits of immortality. Inside the royal tombs, alongside crowns, lay mirrors from China, glasswares from Persia, and artifacts that proved Silla was not isolated but deeply connected. Every item buried was both wealth and message. Here lies a ruler surrounded by the riches of many lands, remembered not just in death but in brilliance as well. In daily life, wealth reshaped society. Farmers brought grains to market. Traders carried goods across borders. Artisans worked gold and jade into ornaments. Potters shaped vessels for rituals. And blacksmiths forged weapons that gave the army its edge. Each part of society fed into another. Silla was no longer just holding ground, it was thriving. What began as a small tribal state was now a golden kingdom. Its power reflected in treasures that glittered in dark tombs and in temples that would soon rise from stone. Silla's strength was no longer measured only in armies. It was measured in crowns that caught the light, treasure that linked to it distant empires, and a capital whose moons swelled with the promise of entirety. Gold showed the brilliance of Silla, but it was faith that gave the kingdom its lasting soul. By the 6th century CE, the rulers of Silla looked for something more than wealth. They turned to Buddhism, not only as a religion, but as a way to bind people together. Temples rose from the earth, their wooden beams painted in bright colors, their bells ringing across their valleys. The sound carried at dawn and dusk, telling farmers, soldiers, and rulers alike that they lived under one spirit. Buddhism transformed the kingdom. Monks arrived carrying scrolls from China, texts that spoke of compassion, order, and rebirth. They taught that the king's power was not only political but sacred, that a ruler could be a guardian of the Dharma, a protector of truth. With faith came legitimacy. With legitimacy came unity. The temples themselves became symbols. Bulguksa Temple stood as a jewel of Silla devotion, its stone pagodas balanced and graceful like frozen flames. In the hills above, the cave shrine of Seokguram was carved into the rocks. Inside, a massive seated Buddha looked out with eyes of stone, calm and eternal. When candles flickered against its face, worshippers felt the presence of something beyond time. Faith and politics moved hand in hand. Silla allied with the Tang dynasty of China, linking spiritual bonds with military power. Together, they defeated their rivals. Baekje, that kingdom fell in 660 CE. Goguryeo followed in 668 CE. For the first time in history, the Korean peninsula was unified under a single crown. This was the birth of the Unified Silla Kingdom, a triumph that seemed impossible when Silla had once been the smallest of the three kingdoms. But the unification was not only worn with swords, it was worn with belief. Buddhist rituals gave people across the peninsula a shared rhythm. Monks traveled between towns and temples, carrying chants that echoed the same prayers in every valley. Farmers bowed before the same statues as kings. Soldiers prayed at the same shrine as monks. Silla had turned faith into a glue that held its people together. The crown glittered in the tombs, yes, but in daily life, it was the temple bell that carried further. In the echo of those bells, Silla found both power and peace at once. At its height, Silla was absolutely breathtaking. By the 8th century, Gongsu was not just a capital, it was a world in itself. Pilgrimage, merchants, and envoy crowded its streets. Foreigners marveled at the city of gold, where tiled roof shimmered in the sun, and earthen tombs rose like green hills in every direction. In markets, silk from China, glass from Persia, and spices from distant seas changed hands. Proof that Silla was tied to a global wave of trade. Temples filled the skyline. Bulguksa Temple, with its wooden halls and stone pagodas, stood as a jewel of faith and power. Its courtyards rang with chanting. Its bells rolled across the valley at dawn. In the mountains nearby, the Seokguram Grotto was complete, a cave carved by human hands into a sanctuary of stone. Inside sat the great Buddha, massive and serene, his gaze unbroken for more than 1,000 years, candlelight flickering against his face, and worshippers knelt in silence, feeling as though the mountain itself was alive. Art and philosophy flourished. Scholars copied sutras and debated convocation techniques. Poets wrote verses of longing, devotion, and impermanence. Craftsmen glided crowns, cast bronze Buddhas, and built pagodas that seemed to defy gravity itself. Silla had turned its earliest struggles for survival into a golden age of culture. Yet beneath this brilliance, the ground began to shift. Wealth flowed unevenly. The aristocracy grew powerful and corrupt, building their own state while peasant labors under crushing taxes. The grandeur of Gyeongju was not felt in every village. Discontent shimmered in the fields, where farmers saw their grain taken while nobles feasted under golden chandeliers. The alliance with Tang China, once the key to Silla's triumph, soured with time. Silla had needed Tang armies to defeat Baekje and Goguryeo. But once the peninsula was unified, Tang sought to keep control. Silla resisted. Battles broke out. Victory came, but at a cost. Silla was scarred, its treasury drained, its trust in allies broken. As decades passed, rebellion stirred. Local lord gathered armies of their own. Peasants rose against injustice, and loyalty to the throne weakened. What had once the kingdom's strength, its unity, began to unravel. From the outside, Silla still shone. Crowns glittered in tombs, monks prayed in vast temples, scholars wrote of peace and balance. But inside, the kingdom was heavy with its own brilliance, like a crown too finely made to be worn for too long. By the 9th century, the brilliance of Silla had begun to dim. The same crowns that once symbolized strength now felt heavy. Aristocrats, hungry for wealth, fought among themselves. Peasants, tired of carrying the weight of taxes and labor, rose in rebellion. Local warlords carved out power in the provinces, and the voice of the king grew weaker in his own capital. The unity that had once been Silla's pride was breaking apart. The Buddhist temples still stood, their bells ringing in the morning air, but even faith could not hold back decline. The beauty of Gyeongju remained. Its tombs, pagodas, and markets still dazzled the visitors. But Inside, corruption hollowed the entire kingdom. By the early 10th centuries, new power rose, and Silla, after nearly 1,000 years, surrendered to the emerging Goguryeo dynasty in 935 CE. Yet Silla's story did not end with its fall. Its crowns, delicate and radiant, still glitter in museums. Its tomb still rise like green hills over Gyeongju. Its temple, like Bulguksa and Seokguram, remains sacred, carried chants through the centuries. The kingdom's art, religion, and sense of unity sank deep into the root of Korean identity. What the Silla left behind was not only gold or stone, but the memory. They showed that a small confederation, dismissed at first, could rise to brilliance through persistence, belief, and vision. They proved that faith can bind a people together as much as any sword. The kingdom fell, but its spirit lives on. The crown still shines, the temple still breathes, and the land of Korea still carries the name and the legacy of Silla. Thank you for watching CTT Stories, ladies and gentlemen. The Silla Kingdom rose from obscurity to rule with gold and faith, living crowns and temples that still speak today. If this story stayed with you, share it forward. And in the comments, write "Gold remembers," a tribute to the brilliance of Silla that never faded. Subscribe for more human stories carved from time. Stay curious, stay human, and remember, some kingdoms vanish, but their light endures. And I'll see you in the next one.